It's your friend Phil, Project Management Trainer and Coach. Today we're taking a look at a very cool subject. A lot of people love this subject because of the formulas in it. Those who are really good at it, they love it, and those who are not good, they don't like it so much. But let's talk about earned value formulas. And let's start off by looking at some of the relationships between these core metrics. So we have three core metrics. We have a metric that I would like you to look at as how much it will cost, right? How much it will cost. I'm going to call how much it will cost the promise. Okay? How much it will cost, I'm calling that the promise. The next metric is how much did it cost in reality? How much did it cost in reality? And I'm going to call that actual, right? The actual amount of money spent. So think about it. How much it will cost, the promise. That is how much you're telling management or you're telling your customer it will cost. The next metric, how much did it cost in reality, is really the actual amount of money that it cost. And then the final one is how much did I get done? And I'll call this performance. So think about it like this. Three core metrics: the promise, the actual, and the performance. Think about the promise as a budget. That's a budget. So you're telling management, oh, I think this is how much it will cost. This is before you've done any work. We call that a budget. The next one, how much did it cost in reality? Actual. It's going to be easy to remember this because we call this the actual cost. And lastly, how much did I get done? That's the real performance. And this is your work performed. That is so easy, isn't it? Three things that you are looking at as the core metrics of earned value. How much it will cost, the promise. I promise this will cost X amount. How much did it cost in reality? The actual. And lastly, how much did I get done? That's the performance. That's the work performed. So I'm going to give you a very ridiculously easy example of these three things. Okay? So let's look at a promise to go from point X to point Y. This is the promise. So the promise is how long, or how much rather, it will cost to go from point X to point Y. The promise that Phil is assuring, Phil says, oh, I promise it's only going to cost $100 to go from X to Y. Okay? So Phil starts his journey, but here's one other piece of the promise. Phil says, I promise I'll go from point X to point Y in 1 hour. Okay? So whenever we make this promise, it's usually within a time period. Okay? So your promise is within a time period. I promise it will cost me $100 to go from X to Y in 1 hour. So Phil starts off his journey. Unfortunately, in 1 hour, he's exactly, let's call this the midpoint. He's exactly at the midpoint in 1 hour. So in the passage of time, instead of Phil going from X to Y, he was only able to go from X to, let's call this midpoint M. He was only able to get to point M in 1 hour. This is where we need to look at the other two aspects. How much did it cost in reality for Phil to go from X to M? And also, what percentage of the work is actually done to go from point X to M? Phil said he would get to Y, but he only got to M. So let's see how bad this is, okay? So the three metrics again. The promise, $100. Now for the sake of this illustration, I'm going to say that the actual amount of money that Phil spent to get this job done is, in this case, $80. Is that good or is that bad? Take a look at the promise. Phil promised he would go from here to here, but he only got from here to here. And he spent $80. Last but not least, how much did I get done? How much did Phil get done? We call this the work performed or the performance. If you look at the performance in dollars, if this is a linear project for the sake of this illustration, the work that Phil has accomplished is only 50% of what was planned. So 50% of the $100 worth of what was planned is really what he has been able to perform. And that's really 0.5 times 100, and that is $50. So the promise was to spend 100 within 1 hour to get all of this done. But in 1 hour, Phil has only accomplished 50%, and he has spent $80. Now let me introduce you to the more rigorous definitions of these three core metrics. So I call them the promise, which is the budget. How much did it cost in reality? The actual cost. And how much did I get done? The performance. But the terms that are used to describe these are other things. Here goes. How much it will cost, the promise, is actually known as the budgeted cost of work scheduled, BCWS. The budgeted cost of work scheduled. Think about it in my example. The budgeted cost of work scheduled for the 1 hour is $100. BCWS, which I call the promise, is one of the most important metrics in earned value management. Now, it's not called earned value, it's called planned value. It's also known as planned value, PV. So budgeted cost of work scheduled is also called planned value. The next one, actual cost, is also known as the actual cost of work performed, in government circles especially, and in aerospace circles, they refer to it as ACWP, but that is also commonly referred to as AC, actual cost. Next one, how much did I get done? The performance, this is earned value itself, and this is known as the budgeted cost of work performed. Remember I said it's the performance, and this is called earned value, EV. So I broke it down into easy to understand chunks first of all to get you more familiar with these three concepts. First concept, how much will it cost in totality? Second concept, how much did it actually cost in reality? And lastly, how much did I get done? So I got 50% of the work done, and I spent more than 50% of the budget. And I didn't get it done within that 1 hour time period. And this is where we go into something I call derivative metrics. So I'm going to go into the derivative metrics, and I'm going to use the blue so that you know this is for derivative. And I've talked about this in quite a few videos. The derivative metrics of earned value management, EV, AC, and PV. The derivative metrics are known as schedule performance index, cost performance index, schedule variance, and cost variance. And I'm sure you know these by now if you're watching this video, hopefully. If not, no big deal. You can always watch my easy to understand videos on this. But they all start with earned value, all of these metrics. If it's a variance, schedule variance and cost variance, we subtract. If it's an index, we divide. And if it has the word schedule in it, remember the promise is within 1 hour. It's scheduled within 1 hour, right? It's time boxed, and that's planned value. We also have the same metric at the end. Anytime you've got an S, you've got a plan, a P for plan. Schedule is the plan. Just remember that. And for CPI, we have the other metric, AC, okay? So, a very quick computation to find out what our derivative metrics are in this example. For the SPI, that will be equal to the earned value of 50 divided by the planned value of 100. And that's $50 divided by 100, and that gives us 0.5. What does that mean? That means you are only 50% efficient schedule-wise. Now if we find the SV takes these same two numbers and just subtracts the planned value from the earned value. So we have schedule variance is equal to the $50 minus the $100, and that gives you minus, watch that minus, very important, minus 50. Minus $50. What does that tell me? That tells me that I am $50 worth of work behind schedule. Remember in the example, Phil should have been done in 1 hour? Well, he's $50 behind because at 1 hour he should have gotten that done. Okay? Take a look at the CPI. CPI is equal to the earned value of 50 divided by the actual cost of 80. What does this give us? Okay, that's the end of part 1. Stay tuned for part 2. Welcome back to part 2. Now to wrap this up, let's do our cost variance. Our cost variance is going to be equal to 50 minus 80, $50 minus $80, and that gives us minus $30. So we can see from this very simple illustration that we have the 4 derivative metrics. Schedule performance index, which tells us we're 50% efficient schedule-wise, $50 behind schedule, $50 behind where we should have been. And CPI, cost performance index, which tells us we are only 0.625 efficient. In other words, we're 62.5% efficient cost-wise, which means for every dollar we're spending, we're only getting 62 cents worth of work done. We're not breaking even, we're losing money. And lastly, minus $30 cost variance, that tells us that we are over budget by $30. That work that we got done and spent $80, we should have only spent what? We should have only spent $50 for that work, because that's just the midpoint. Okay? So, to better understand earned value, I would highly advise you to get acquainted with your BCWS, ACWP, and BCWP. Think about what they mean. Budgeted cost of work scheduled, actual cost of work performed, and budgeted cost of work performed. If you could get those into your subconscious, understand what they mean, you'll find it a lot easier to tackle earned value management. And that's all for the first of this, I should say, modules on earned value management. The next one I'm about to do is going to be a module on the graphs, the charts of earned value, taking a look at what would happen if we plot out PV, AC, EV. Explain that in some more detail. Alright, so look out for the video. Thanks for your audience. All the best on your exam.